Hello again, my name is Anne Marie Zansel, and welcome to Coming Out and Beyond LGBTQIA plus stories. I am an ordained minister, bereavement counselor, conversationalist, spiritual wanderer, later in life lesbian, change maker, blogger, author, mom of 4 beautiful children, wife to my lovely wife, Tonda McKay, a northerner living in the South and trying to figure it all out. I share the stories of people who are coming out later in life to the LGBTQIA plus community and other queer stories. These stories are compelling, heartbreaking, joyful, and inspirational. I started this podcast because we need to normalize exploration of sexuality and gender at all ages. Plus, visibility is vital to the queer community. It's never too late to be who we are created to be. My guest proved that. I am very excited today to have a friend and a guest, Suzette Mullen. Suzette Mullen is an author, retreat leader, and certified book coach who helps LGBTQ plus writers and allies start and finish nonfiction books they will be proud to share with the world. Her mission is to use her gifts and passion for justice to help birth LGBTQ plus stories that bring light, hope, and connection to people who feel alone or othered. And maybe, just maybe, change hearts and minds, one story at a time in the process. This brilliant lady is a graduate of Harvard Law School and Wellesley College and also holds a certificate in spiritual formation from Columbia Theological Seminary. In 2019, she brought her passion for justice to her new hometown of Lancaster, Pennsylvania, and co-founded the Lancaster LGBTQ Coalition. This proud mom of 2 adult sons, she is loving this chapter of her life with her wife, Wendy, and their rescue pup, Lucy, and is forever grateful the universe nudged her to take a detour 5 years ago to central Pennsylvania, where she's been embraced with open arms by friends of all ages, genders, and sexual orientations. Welcome, Suzette. I am so excited to have you here today.
Thank you. I'm so happy to be here. It's a pleasure.
So, Suzette, tell me your story.
Oh boy, how long do you have? Okay, well, I will try to cut to the chase. When I was in my mid-50s, I'm 60 now. I was an empty nester. I was married to a man. My 2 children were in college and out in the world. I have 2 young adult sons. And I was embarking on the next chapter. And let's just say the next chapter's took some twists and turns I had not anticipated. I was writing. Writing has always been a big part of my life, and I had decided that that was really what I wanted to spend my time professionally doing in this next chapter. And I was working on a memoir about my professional journey and some of my struggles in my professional journey. And as I worked on this memoir, my fingers traveled to a different story. And it was a story about an intense long-term friendship I had with a female friend. Mm-hmm. And that had confused me and perplexed me. And I didn't understand this friendship. I knew it was different. As I wrote, what became clear to me that I had been in denial about for close to 2 decades was that I didn't just love this friend, but I had been and still was in love with her. Mm-hmm. And that was the moment that set in motion this journey that has landed me where I am today. I began to, first come to terms with what that relationship really was. Mm-hmm. And then what did it mean for my life? I had a life that from the outside looked perfect, and there were a lot of very good things about that life. I was married to a kind and loving man. I had financial security. I had I had the ocean view home. I had, I had a very good life. And all along, there was something that was just not quite there. And I felt very restless throughout most of my married life. I thought it was about the fact that I hadn't landed on a professional life that was the right one for me. And I do believe that was part of it, but it was part of a much bigger story.
Mhm.
And so that began the journey. I shared what I had, the sort of epiphany about this friendship. I shared it with my husband, and we kind of put it back in the box for a while.
Which is really
Just,
normal for our later in life community.
yeah,
A lot
yeah.
of people tell their husbands, and then it's huge. It's a huge moment where and then it just sort of gets put away for a while, right?
Yeah, I actually, I had a therapist that I worked with years and years ago. Um, and I went back to her with this, challenge. And the advice I got from her was that I could do whatever I wanted to do with this. Which is actually true. But it was, you don't have, I went to her saying, well, what if I'm gay? Like, what if I'm gay? What am I supposed to do? Kind of thing. And because at that point I was not at all like, I am gay. I was more like, what if this because I've been in love with this friend for, 18 years, what if it means I'm gay?
Yeah,
And what am I supposed to do?
yeah, with
And
my clients, I always start with this point of, I might not be straight, it's like, and what am I going to do with this?
right. So, the therapist was like, well, you don't have to do anything about it. You can decide. And I mean, there was more to it than that I don't need to get on that detour. But so basically I was like, all right, maybe I'm gay, maybe I'm not. And I don't have to do anything about it. I can just, I can go on with my life. So we kind of went back to our merry way, went on with our life. And then probably about, I don't know, 8, 9, 10 months later, I just woke up one morning and I was like, I can't do this anymore. It had just been building, and it was like everywhere I went, I would see lesbians all of a sudden. It was just like
I
everywhere.
understand. Yeah.
And the longing just got, just harder and harder to just live with. And so I went to a different therapist and really started getting real with myself. I found this later in life online support group where you and I met, and that was a lifeline because literally I didn't know a single other soul who was grappling with what I was grappling with. And that was a big turning point to realize that I wasn't alone, and that other people were struggling, had gotten to the other side. I eventually shared my feelings with this friend, which was probably the hardest conversation I've ever had to have in my life. And certainly ranked up there in the top 3. And she initially was accepting of the fact that I felt that the way I did. She said she didn't reciprocate those feelings, but a few months later, she just kind of vanished from my life. I think she just couldn't deal with it. I've written a whole nother memoir. I will talk about that later, but about this story. And so my husband and I tried counseling, tried to see if that we could continue our marriage with this truth in the middle of it. Initially, he wanted to stay married. I kind of did too. I really didn't want to change my life. But I did get to the point where I realized that I wasn't willing to go to my grave without knowing really who I was or experiencing that part of my identity. Because at that point, although I'd had very intense feelings for a woman for many, many years. I mean, I hadn't even kissed a woman. I mean, there had been no, actual.
Yeah, Suzette and my stories are very similar in that way. And that's why I think we connected in the beginning, because our stories were very similar. So I understand. I absolutely.
Yeah. So fast forward, decision, eventually mutual decision to divorce. That was in the fall of 2016. So a little over 5 years ago. I ended up moving to a city that I knew one person in. That's part of the magic that happened once I
remember when you went to Lancaster. You
were
supposed to go to Nashville, and you went to, my gosh, isn't that amazing what happened?
Yeah. And the third night I was in Lancaster, I had a date with a woman who I had met online. Her name is Wendy, and we are married now. So
successful date.
I'm very, very monogamous. So I have a completely different life. It now 5 years plus out, it no longer feels so much like a new life. It feels like my life. I finally embrace both who I was personally and then also professionally, because I'm a book coach now, a certified book coach who works with, as you said in your intro, with nonfiction writers with a special focus on the LGBTQ plus community, memoir writers in that community. And I'm also a writer myself. So I'm in the process, as we speak, of sending out queries to agents about my book, which is called Graveyard of Safe Choices.
Ooh, that's a lovely title. I like it.
Yeah.
So I want to get back to some of the things you said. So in our community, we talk about a catalyst, right? And a catalyst is a person that makes you realize that it can be two things. It can be a woman or a man that makes you realize that you might not be straight and you're attracted to, or it can be an event, like something happens in your life. Like a lot of times it can be a divorce, a death of a parent, a death of a child, something really that a lot of the people that were in our group had some serious illness. And then they realized, did that happen to you? I know you had your female catalyst that, you had for 20 years, but did you have anything that just sort of shifted it really quickly? Because you said in the beginning, you were an empty nester. Was that it?
Yes and no. What I would say is that there were a few moments that I can point to prior to the, actual revelation, epiphany, where I was really examining my life. My father passed away in 2011. He had Parkinson's disease. He was diagnosed at 52 and died at 73. And I think a death of a parent is a common time when we sort of ask ourselves, what am I doing? Who am I? What am I doing? And so that was also right around the time I turned 50. And so I've been living despite all the denial, which is kind of a weird place to be, despite all the denial, I actually had been living a very examined life in other aspects of my life. So it wasn't like I wasn't grappling with the deep questions about identity and, my purpose and what am I here on earth to do. I've been grappling those sort of ad nauseum for years. When my father passed away, that was another kind of moment. And then, yes, the empty nest, when my husband and we actually left our home in Houston. We used to live in Houston, and we moved to Montauk, New York, where we had a vacation home, but we moved there, and my parents lived, nearby. My dad was no longer alive, but we left for a year that we called a year of discernment, and it really was a year that we were going to figure out what our next chapter was. So it was very, very intentional, because we didn't know, would we leave Houston permanently? Would we move to Montauk? What work would we be doing? And that was the year that I got clarity on my professional path. I got clear that, yes, I was going to put a stake in the ground. I've always loved to write. I've been editing things ad nauseum. I've been doing everything around writing, but I hadn't, put a stake in the ground. Like, I'm a writer, I'm an editor, I'm a book coach. And I put that stake in the ground. That was the outcome of that year of discernment. It was 2 years later that, because of that discernment, and because I was claiming my call as a writer, that I was writing this memoir about my professional life that led me to this other story about this friendship. And it literally was the words on the page. I mean, to get even to parse it a little, more finely, I was working with a book coach. I had someone who was helping me with my book, and I would send her pages every week. And when I wrote about this moment with this friend, I knew it was a super vulnerable moment. And I knew that I didn't understand the power of it, but I knew it was powerful. And it was a very vulnerable, scary moment to write. And it was very scary to send it to the book coach, but I did. And when she returned her feedback to me on one sentence I wrote, which was, I grazed the arm of this friend, and this electricity, this warmth, this charge went through my body. And I mean, this is how out of touch I was with my body. I didn't understand what that was in the moment. I didn't understand what that was 15, 16, 17 years later when I wrote about it. And when this book coach said, that sounds exactly like someone who's falling in love. And when I saw that comment, I was like, are we allowed to curse on this?
Sure. Go for it.
I was like, oh, fuck.
Well, I can just imagine you like it was like a moment where the energy is just going around you as you read this sentence.
It was, well, sometimes, whether it's a book coach or a therapist or a life coach or whatever, that's why we sometimes need someone else to help us see things that we can't see ourselves, because we're just too close to it. And she could have written that comment, and I could have read it, and I could have said, yeah, that's not what that was. But there was an absolute moment of clarity and truth for me in that moment. And I was like, yes, I mean, the struggles that I had over my feelings and this friendship that I couldn't articulate before, it was like, yeah, that is it. And then I was like, oh my God, and yeah.
And so that happened before you started to put the wheels in motion, like telling your husband and everything.
Well, I told my husband very shortly thereafter. because we had, well, I mean, I think it was in part the kind of relationship that we had, and also my sort of what for me was my core integrity is that once I knew that this truth, I couldn't keep it from him. And but I did couch it. I mean, I didn't say, oh, I was in love with her and I'm still in love with her and I think I might be gay and, you know, all of that. I just I read him the pages and I said to him, you know, in a sort of very tentative way, I'm coming to understand that I had been in love with her. And that was it. That was as far as I could go in that moment. And you know, his initial reaction was that he was upset. You know, he was angry. You betrayed me. And I was like, no, that's not what this was, you know. But very quickly, I mean, within seconds, he sort of stepped back and he said, I knew, because she was you know, had become a family friend, and, you know, had been in our lives for years. And so it wasn't like there was this mystery person. So, you know, we were all kind of operating under denial for a long time. Like there was this triangle that there, you know, it worked for all of us for a very long time until it didn't work. And then it fell apart.
Well, until you wanted more.
Well, until I think I wanted more. I knew I did want more for my life for decades, but I wasn't clear on where the more was. I didn't see how everything was connected. And once I saw the truth or acknowledged the truth, you know, that was when it just became inevitable. Although in the moment, I still tried to, like I said, we put the genie back in the bottle for a while, and then I just couldn't do it anymore. And I think, you know, you were asking, was there a catalyst or a moment? Well, for me, it was, you know, this friend was the person who was the catalyst, and then the writing, the seeing my words on the page, my truth on the page, was the really, you know, we talk about the inciting incident in a narrative, in a book, a novel. That was my inciting incident. And I want to share one more thing. Of course, then, you know, and I think this is true for many of us who are questioning or coming to terms with our sexuality later in life, is then, of course, then we go back through our entire life, right? And we're like, you know, we think this thing has come out of the blue, but I think for many of us, you know, there were signs all along, but that we interpreted those signs differently. And I certainly have, you know, a whole host of things where I then now looked back and understood these things differently. But there was one, being a writer, words are so important to me, and the written word in particular. And I've journaled on and off most of my life. I mean, there have been long periods where I didn't journal at all, but then there were periods I did. And I had a journal from my senior year of high school, and which actually I was studying abroad that year. I lived in England with a family. And there is literally one sentence in that journal, but it's there. It's my handwriting. It's written. And it is, I'm wondering, there's this boy that my host sister is trying to set me up with. And I write something like, I wonder what's going to happen with Nick. And I say, and I really don't care. And then I wrote, that's why I'm rather worried about my sexual orientation.
Wow.
And I am like, when I saw that, I was blown away because I have no memory of writing it. I have no memory of being rather worried about my sexual orientation when I was 18 years old. But apparently I was, and so, yeah.
Suzette, that's so funny you talk about that because I do the support groups and we were talking about that last night, recovered memory. That's really, really key in our later in life experience. All of a sudden, like when I came out, apparently I told my best friend 20 years ago that I was gay. And I was like, I what? Like I have no memory.
Right.
No memory of it at all. And so I think that happens to a lot of us. And also too, some of the other things is that you put stories that you had put into one category, like we're like, oh, wait a minute. That then you put it into another category, stories that may have been a shame category now all of a sudden go into another category. We realize that, oh, wait a minute. So that sort of fun too, because it validates, right?
Oh yeah. I mean, my first crush was on a female high school teacher. And, I would not have called it a crush. But when I look back on it, and I can see some of the same patterns that I had with this female friend, later in life, that was my catalyst. I could see a lot of similarities and a lot of patterns that some of the same things I did. And I remember talking to my therapist, a third therapist, and the one that I worked with when I first went to Lancaster and moved to Lancaster, and she actually happens to be a later in life lesbian herself. And I said to her, I told her about this high school friend, high school teacher. And I said, but don't, and at this point, I still wasn't totally convinced I was gay, even though like all the evidence was so close, but I just was like, I still was like, am I really? Or like, I was still in that place, even though I was getting divorced. And it's just very hard for me to like claim that identity. And so I was telling her about this high school teacher and, my crush. And I said, but don't lots of girls have crushes on, female teachers? And she said, yeah, but most of them turn out to be lesbians. And like, okay, so it's all this.
I have such a question of curiosity for you. You went to Wellesley. I mean, like girl colleges are like, everybody's a lug, a lesbian until graduation. So.
I know. Well, I mean, that's another interesting part of the story, because that was another reason that I was convinced that I couldn't be a lesbian, because I had gone to Wellesley College and there were tons of lesbians. I mean, it's, very open now. But even when I was there, which was, decades ago, there certainly were, there were women who were out as lesbians, or there were certainly plenty of women that were experimenting and all of that. And I knew them, but they weren't my people. And I didn't identify with the people who were visibly out.
Why do you think that was? I mean, I have a theory about all of this.
Well, I think that I had a very narrow view or understanding of who lesbians were. I mean, they were, they were butch, they were, very masculine, presenting, and kind of militant. I mean, that was my view in the the early 80s when I was in college. And because I didn't have any models that were different. I didn't know I didn't know any lesbians, or at least I,
Well, and what I've noticed in our later in life community is a lot of us, not everybody, this is a bell curve. A lot of us fall on more on the femme side. And I was sort of like have developed a theory is that like we could be in the closet, because a lot of times women that are more masculine of center or, defined as butch, they have glass closets. It's really hard to stay in a glass closet, and
Yeah.
so while, I find that not all of us, but a lot of us change our look as we become into ourselves. So somebody may start out really sort of femme looking, but as they come into themselves, their looks change. I mean, we've done the before and afters in some of the groups we are in, and people do change the way they look. So I am like, I agree with you. I think it was like, for me, it was like, I don't look like that, so I can't be like that. And it was a very narrow view.
Yeah, I think it was a combination of, both the sort of outward appearance that wasn't how I presented or viewed myself as presenting, but I also just like, I did not happen to connect, on a personal level with anyone who was a lesbian or gay in college. I mean, not like, they weren't my friends. I mean, I had, you have a friend, you find your friend group, right? And as they call it now, we didn't call it friend group, but they call, I found my friend group. I'm still very close with a good number of those friends. And, everybody was straight in my friend group, and I thought I was too. And so I just, that's what, and it's interesting because just a few years into this friendship with this female friend, so at this point I'm like in my late 30s, I was I'd probably been friends with her for like a year, 2 years, and I was really struggling with it. And I shared some of my struggle with an acquaintance. And I just said, I don't know what to do with this. I like can't stop thinking about this friend. I want to be with her all the time and all that. And this acquaintance who is like a spiritual director said to me in a very gentle voice, she said, "What would you think about if you were," she used the term homosexual, this is what would you think if you were homosexual? And I was like, what? I was like, no, that's not what this is. And I remember thinking at the time, well, no, I couldn't be homosexual. I'm married to this man and I love him. And I remember even thinking about like, well, I went to a women's college, and if I was homosexual, I would have known it, or I would have done something about it, when I had an opportunity. So to me, that was, it's like my former background. We didn't talk about this, but my former professional background was I was a lawyer. And, I realized that I was building a case for myself about why I couldn't possibly be gay, and, that was part of the evidence. I went to women's college and I didn't do anything with women. I could have. So, ergo, I must not be gay. I mean,
So, it's really interesting because I've really thought about this, because a lot of the women that we know, often have experiences when they were in college or school,
sure.
and then they get married and,
Yep.
men and, I also like, for me, I wonder that like, and I don't know how you would feel about this, but I wonder if I like somehow knew that if I went down that road, that I wouldn't be able to like get back. Like it scared me because it was, I was raised very conservatively Catholic, and it scared me. And so like I did contemplate it in my early 20s and stuff like that, but I didn't give it a lot of energy. You know what I mean? Like when I couldn't find like a friend to go to a gay bar with, I didn't go. I just didn't give it the respect and energy that it deserved.
That was not my experience.
Okay.
My experience was, it wasn't I mean, literally, it wasn't even on my radar.
Mhm.
Or, you know, yes, I had that one sentence I wrote when I was 18 that I was rather worried about my sexual orientation, but apparently I didn't write another sentence about that until, way, way later. So no, I didn't, I think I was just really disconnected from my body. And you know I just didn't ever think that I mean, I wasn't raised, I wouldn't say I was raised in a conservative home, but I was raised in a very conventional home.
Mhm.
you know um you know Two parent public school teachers, same jobs their entire
Yeah.
careers, like this. This is what I followed a very conventional path. And I think, in many ways that was why I was restless and discontent, because it wasn't just the sexuality, it wasn't just the professional. It was that, I had chosen this professional path because I was following this,
Got to get a
lockstep
good
path,
job. Got to
which
get.
was not really who I was, but I didn't know any different. So I think that my true self, professionally and personally, was slowly dying, over the years. And then at a certain point, it was like, are you gonna let her die completely, or are you gonna blow up your life? And that's what it felt like. I felt like that's what the choice felt like to me. And I think that's why I stayed stuck for as long as I did. But then when I just, I had an epiphany, I had a number of epiphanies along the way where I just said, I can't do this anymore. And I'm not willing to go to my grave,
Mhm.
without living my true life.
So
So,
I want to ask you one more question about
mhm,
like, the coming out experience, and then I want to hear about what you do now, because you're
sure.
a writer and you're writer soul. Um, did you blow up your life, Suzette?
Great question. Well, that's a great question. Um, I I felt like that's what I was doing at the time. And a huge challenge for me, and I think for many women, or many people that are at this grappling, who have established lives. It's like, it's not only your own life, it's the other people, your
People around
children, your
us.
spouse, and all of those things. Um, yeah, I mean, I think I would still use that language, but it's not, it needed to be blown up to be reformed. And my life is very, very different. My, ex-husband's life is very, very different. I think he's happy. He's remarried. I'm remarried. My kids are fine. My and so I why I would still maybe use that language, but what I would say is, I think some women use, and I may have used this myself, about destroying. I didn't destroy anything. Um, I made a radical change. So if you want to say that's blowing up, I made a radical change that impacted many people beyond me, and that was very difficult. And I now, on the other side of it, am very much at peace that it was necessary.
Yeah.
And you know I wanted to do it in a way that there would be no pain for anyone, and that is not possible. And there's pain if you stay, and there's pain if you go, and you choose your pain.
Well, if
That
you stay, then you're the one who bears all the pain.
Right. Well, exactly. Yeah, you do. And depending on your situation, um, your spouse is living in a marriage where the other partner isn't can't be fully in. So, but as I know, and our job is not to, manage the other people's pain. But I felt a huge responsibility. And, I'm a first child, I'm a rule follower. Um, and, this was breaking the rules.
Oh, yeah, big time, big
Yep.
time.
Yep.
So tell me about your work you're doing now. I'm really excited about it. I feel like queer stories need to be told, whether it's later in life or someone who came out at 15. I think these stories need to be told. And I think one of the gifts of your journey is that it has made you so unbelievably qualified to coach people about this stuff. And so tell me about that. What are you doing?
Yeah.
And like, how can
Sure.
people find you and all those
Yeah.
things like that?
Great. Yeah, so first, I'll just start briefly with my own writing. As I mentioned, I am a memoir writer, and I have a completed manuscript and book proposal. My memoir is called Graveyard of Safe Choices, and I am looking for a home for it right now. I am querying, that's a really hard word to say, ironically, querying. I am sending query letters, which are, cover letters basically to agents, and I have a plan. I'm seeking agent representation. I've also got a list of small presses that I'm going to be sending my manuscript to, and I feel confident I'm going to find a home for my book. I don't know exactly what it will be, but I'm excited, and I'm very happy with my manuscript. It's took me years and years and many, many, many drafts, and it is a book that represents my best work. So I feel very good about that.
Well, I'm so excited because that there's 5 or 10 books that people refer to and are
Right, exactly.
So
Yeah,
we need a couple more.
right, exactly. Yeah, and it's interesting because while the context of my story is a coming out story, I don't view it, I view it as a story that's about something bigger than that. It's a story about learning to listen to what's within, and then having the courage to act on it. And so my ideal reader is not only a person who is grappling with their sexuality and what to do about it. They certainly are people, I hope, who will read my book. But my broader audience are primarily women. I don't anticipate a lot of men are going to be reading my book. Women that are at midlife, who are examining their lives, and who are desiring something more, and are afraid of the cost. And so, my story, I believe, proves that it's never too late to say yes to your life. So that's the message. And then as far as the work I do with writers, so I am a certified book coach. I've trained with a company called Author Accelerator that is kind of the nation's premier book coaching community. And I work for myself. My business is called Your Story Finder. And I work primarily one-on-one right now with memoir writers. I do work with some writers that are writing self-help as well. And I help them first build the foundation for their book before they actually start writing it, and getting really clear on why they're writing, who they're writing it for, what their primary point is. We structure it. I have a whole outlining process. So by the time they're ready to either do a book proposal or write their manuscript, they have a roadmap and they actually know what they're doing, so that they don't spend years writing in circles. And so I do that one-on-one work. And I'm also, I'm building a group coaching program that will be, I'll be rolling out in September for queer memoir writers. And if people are interested, they can get on an interest list. And finally, an exciting opportunity that's more current is I'm partnering with the Pride and Joy Foundation, which is a LGBTQ plus nonprofit. And we are, I'm leading a 6-week course for queer nonfiction writers. So both memoir, and if you're writing like a business book or self-help book, a prescriptive nonfiction book. I've got a 6-week course. It's called Outright Authors, and we do have some space still available. It's going to start in early March, and that is, I don't know, you can probably put it in your show notes, but that is, you can go to the Pride and Joy Foundation and on their website and find out information about that course. And then to find out more about me and my work, it's yourstoryfinder.com.
All right. So thank you. I have a couple of questions that I always end the podcast with. Do you have a coming out song, Suzette?
You know, this is terrible because you told me about this, and when you just asked me, I'm like, oh my gosh, I did, but what, I believe what I said is, Brave. Did I say
Yes,
Brave
you
by
did.
Sarah Bareilles? Okay.
Yeah,
I'm like, oh my
I have your notes in front of
Okay,
me.
thank
So,
you.
yes.
Because I know I answered these questions, but I haven't looked at it since then. Yeah, I love Sarah Bareilles. I think, you know, many of us in this community do. And that song is a song that I, at different times in this journey, I've just played on repeat, on repeat, on repeat. And yeah.
Yeah, I have a bunch of songs, and one of mine is This Is Me from
Oh yeah, that's another one.
From The
Oh yeah.
Greatest Showman.
Yeah.
And I also, like, I'm a survivor because during parts of the messy middle, which we all know about, which for those of you who are listening, it's like the part where you realize you're gay, but you also are making a bunch of changes in your life, and it feels incredibly messy. I used to play I'm a Survivor on very loud because I felt like I was surviving something. I was surviving massive change in my life all at once. And a lot of times too with us, it's a lot of change. I mean, it's identity. You got divorced. You know, all the stuff with your kids, you moved like I did.
I mean, my life.
Like, if you ever read the inventory of like stressful things in your life, you did like all of them. All of them.
I've written about that. I'm like, as an overachiever, I added coming out later in life in my mid-50s, you know, to, you know, divorce, moving, and exactly.
And it's a lot, and starting a business. I mean, you know, really starting a business and really growing it. I mean, it's a lot.
It is
okay. So your book you wrote is She's Not Here by Jennifer Finney Boylan.
Yes.
Tell me about that book.
Yeah, so that is a memoir by a transgender author, and it's actually a fairly old book. I mean, the author, Jennifer Finney Boylan, is an English professor and an author. She's written many, many books, and she's a fantastic writer. And one of my very close friends handed me that book when I was in the throes of the messy middle. This friend, oldest child, had come out as transgender, and the friend said to me, you know, I know that you're not trans. I know that that's not your experience, but I think you're going to relate to a lot of what's in this book. And I mean, I devoured the book. It's a great read. She's a great writer. Anyone who's on this journey, I would very much recommend. I mean, some of the language is a little dated because it was written, you know, when the language was a little different. However, I remember, I can picture myself in this moment where I opened the book to this scene where the author is having this inner dialogue of just going back and forth, like, you have this great life. How can you possibly think about giving it up? And you're, you know, and then the other part is saying, but I have to. And there was just this back and forth and back and forth. And I just remember feeling like that author was inside my head, and I felt understood and seen. And that's a huge part of why I'm writing my book. And I also am helping LGBTQ plus memoir writers write theirs, because, books can help us feel connected. They can help us feel seen and less alone. And yeah.
How's your life now?
How's my life now? I'd say it's pretty damn good.
Okay.
I love my life. I spend my days, well, right now I'm at the beach, but this is not my typical place. I spend my days immersed in words and writing myself or helping other writers write. I have a co-working community called the Candy Factory. Shout out to the Candy Factory, Lancaster PA. It's an amazing community of creatives, and it keeps me alive and engaged. And most people are younger than me, and I love it. I'm engaged in the queer community in Lancaster. I was a founding board member of the Lancaster LGBTQ plus Coalition, and now I'm on the advisory board. So I'm very connected in that community. I have a lovely wife who keeps me well fed, and she helps me. She brings the fun to the relationship. I tend to be pretty serious and intense, and she can have her serious, intense moments also, but she tends to, go with the flow, let's just say, more than I do. And she helps lighten the mood in the household. We have a little dog. I never had a pet in my entire life, other than like goldfish and turtles, because I was allergic to other animals. And we have a little dog named Lucy, who is a pip. And I practice yoga. I love my life. It's a pretty simple life. I see my sons occasionally. They don't, I don't know about you. I know you have sons and daughters, but they don't, we don't talk all that often, but that isn't anything new. That was the case when I was still married to their father. They just, they're very independent, but they're happy. They both, they came to my wedding last June and, celebrated with us. And they've been very supportive of me and also their father. So, life is good. Life is good.
It's so funny. The way you describe Wendy is the way I would describe Tonda. And the way you described yourself is the way I would describe me, because I'm pretty serious too a lot of the times. And she balances me out. She makes me, she keeps me well fed, all those things. And as you know, I have a puppy underneath my feet right now. And it's the first animal I've ever had that's mine. Like, we had dogs with kids, but it was always for the kids, and so having a puppy that's mine, who I adore, and he adores me, it's really, really nice. So, well, Suzette, thank you so much for coming on the podcast. I really appreciate it. I don't think either of us could have imagined this 5 years ago, 6 years ago.
No,
you were one of the people I had some really hard times when I was coming out, and Suzette was one of the people I called up once crying hysterically, and she was a really great listener. And, I could have never imagined this like 5, 6 years ago, never. So there's so much possibilities out there, right?
Yeah.
There is. So thank you.
Say yes to your life. It's never too late.
That's very nice. I like that. Say yes to your life. It's never too late. That will be the tagline on all the social media posts.
Okay, good. I like that. Yeah, absolutely.
And I'll put Suzette Mullen.
Yeah, perfect.
All right. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. Great to talk to you.